Master Sergeant Whaley left the McGrath checkpoint 24 hours after checking in. He and his dogs made their way to the small town of Takotna, where they rested there for an hour. On the trail to the Ophir checkpoint, the safety of the dogs forced Whaley to make one of the hardest decisions he would ever have to make.
Well, today I'm feeling a little better than I did yesterday. I was, I guess, more discouraged than anything. In fact, maybe the word's heartbroken. It's something I've worked for years and wanted for years, and it was going so well. I pulled out of McGrath after my 24-hour layover, and the dogs ran really well to Takotna. We stayed there about an hour and went on to Ophir, and they ran really great there. I rested about 6 hours, and when we left there, they were just different. They were sick. It took us about 28 hours to go what should have taken about 14 to 15 hours. So I made the decision when I got to the cripple checkpoint that in the interest of the health of these guys that I would just, I would drop out of the race. I think I went, it's about 550 miles I made. But actually, I went through the roughest, toughest part of the race, all the Dalzell Gorge, the Happy River Steps, across the Rainy Pass, across the mountains. And I did the most difficult terrain, even though the terrain I was in was not easy. I think that's what I learned more about this race, was that the terrain is extremely difficult and the trails are very difficult. So actually I did more than half of it. I have guys like Sammy here. He kind of helped keep us in it. Sammy was one of those that when he was feeling down and his head was down, his tail was down, he still kept going. And you know, these are the great guys. These are the athletes, not me. And my job is just to be their veterinarian and their dietitian and their trainer and their caretaker. And so I tried to honor them by not pushing them any harder than they could go. On that day when I hooked my dogs up in Ophir, I knew that they weren't feeling well. I knew that they weren't the same dogs I'd been running with. And as they continued to traverse the trail that day, there were 5 teams together. 3 of the teams had sick dogs. Their lack of desire to eat anything or drink anything, wanting to stop and just lay down, which was not characteristic of sled dogs. Sled dogs, you have to make them stop. And as we moved along, the decision began to make itself for me. I probably wouldn't be able to go on. I knew I wouldn't be able to go on with these dogs like they were. It would not be humane to try to ask them to do anything more. But when it came to the point of having to see the race official and say, I'm going to scratch, it was a hard moment. It was a very difficult, heartbreaking moment. And the race official came in, put his arm around my shoulder. He said, just let it go. And I guess he knew others who had been there and knew what I was feeling, but it was a difficult time. After we left Cripple and went back to McGrath, and then we loaded the dogs on a plane and flew back to Fort Richardson, Alaska, the Army post there close to Anchorage. Loaded them on the truck and in their little kennels and drove back to Michigan. We spent a couple days getting all the equipment cleaned up, put away for the season, and then on Thursday of that week, Sergeant Woodward, who was from Dover, Tennessee, and myself, we loaded up my little truck and we headed back to Tennessee. You know, my National Guard experience over 24 years has taught me a lot of things. Some of it would be related to being outdoors and being in the environment in which I was in. Some of it were more internal things, such as discipline, such as planning, such as knowing how to take advantage of your environment as opposed to letting it take advantage of you. You know, it was a great honor to represent the National Guard in the Iditarod, to be sponsored by them. But it was more than that. It was more the fact that I was proud to represent the Army National Guard. When people looked at our truck and they saw on the side it said National Guard Iditarod Racing Team. And people in that environment there are a lot of military stationed up there. It seemed that they wanted to show their appreciation to all of our soldiers just by how they reacted to me. We got a lot of applause and a lot of cheers that some of the other mushers who were very competitive didn't seem to get. Just simply, I think it was people's way of saying they appreciated what we did. And so You know, I kind of received that on behalf of all my fellow soldiers, but to represent the Guard seemed to me to be more important than being sponsored by them. You know, when I was a little boy and I lived in Alaska, and I raced in junior races, but all the big races, I mean the championship, the Fur Rendezvous, the Iditarod, they ran right down 4th Avenue. They closed the streets down, and it was on television, and I always dreamed of running a team down 4th Avenue. Our team was parked down a side street, and that's where we actually hooked up, and so it became our time to go, and we bootied the dogs, and we put the harnesses on, hooked them to the team, and as we started moving forward, we made that turn. The handlers were holding the dogs. We made that turn onto 4th Avenue. It was just an awesome moment, and I thought, I'm going to run down 4th Avenue. And it's been 46 years since I dreamed that dream. And so we got up to the start line, and I looked down and saw all this multitude of people just stretched out on both sides of the street. And they gave the countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. But as we ran through all the streets, and the people would cheer me on, and you'd go down the trails, and it was just a memorable moment to finally get that one little moment in life. It only lasted for just a couple of minutes, but I dreamed about it for all these years. But I've tucked that one away in the back of my memory bank, and I think I'll go back to it and enjoy it for many years to come.